Hi, and welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay, a podcast that dives into fetish life, kink life, and sober life, and everything in between. This week, I will be talking to Saba. Hello, Saba. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. A little bit tired today because we had the election yesterday, and I had a work day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Oh,
So
wow.
a little bit tired, but that's fine. And how's your week been?
Crazy because I'm doing 10 things at the same time, but I'm all right.
Fantastic, fantastic. Like with every episode I do four standard questions at the start, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes.
Sounds good to me.
Fantastic. What do you prefer I call you? Names, pronouns, and title.
So it would be actually, I'm quite easy. Most people call me he and him, but I do have friends that call me she, and I have no problem with that. In terms of titles, when it comes to the relationships I have with my subs, it will always be master. I have only few subs that are allowed to call me Saba. And as you may know, as I'm French, in French we do have a formal way of addressing a person, which is the vous. Uh, while we are in sessions, they are saying vous, and some are saying vous all the time, and the others are allowed to say tu, which is the informal way of addressing me in real life.
Hmm.
And but yeah, other than that, it's master, sir, and but among people that are not my subs, it can be totally Saba, and that's cool.
Fantastic, fantastic. That gives me a little bit more knowledge about what you're about, which is exciting. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in France until I decided to leave uh, for my career as a professional dancer at the time, and I went to the United States. What was supposed to be 2 weeks became 25 years. I became an American citizen, and I have returned to Europe and France exactly during COVID in 2020. I have been a fetishist since the age of 9 when I saw a bunch of bikers crossing my little town. And I thought, I don't know what that is, but I want to be that. And I didn't want to join them. I knew I wanted to have a motorcycle. I wanted to wear leather, chains and studs, and a perfecto shot jacket, all these things, and gloves, and of course I couldn't do that at 9 years old. You can imagine. But in when I was 13, I was emancipated, and I had to grow up with my stepbrother at the time, who was 16, and we ended up without parents. And I was sent to basically boarding schools for boys. And because I didn't have money to pay, I had a scholarship from the government. And the only school that would take me was a school where, even though I was 13, the average person was 19.
Oh, wow.
So I basically jumped 5 years of schooling. It was a freaking nightmare. And the only way I could survive in this type of environment full of testosterone was to affirm my love for leather and punk. And right there and then at 14, my first mohawk, first piercings, and first, like little like studded bracelet, and then studded belt, and then like combat boots, and little by little I started to build that really rebellious look, and I really got turned on by it because it would give me something. I was like, I don't know why, but when I'm dressed like that, I feel really cool and hot, and so then I had a motorcycle, so leather pants came in, and then another leather jacket, and then more and more. And it's only later, when I was 20 something, that I discovered that my love for leather was a lot more than just wearing leather. It went also in the bedroom. I realized that wearing leather while I was having intercourse was really hot. And then I moved to New York, and I was a dancer, as I mentioned. And to survive, I was teaching French classes, private classes. And one of my students tells me one day, "Oh, by the way, Saba, do you know what I'm doing?" And I said, "No." She's like, "I'm a dominatrix." And I had heard of that word. Keep in mind, this was in 97, 8, so no social medias and things like that. And I was like, dominatrix. Yeah, I mean, I knew in France we had a lot of dominatrix, especially in Paris, that were like punishing people right and left. And she gave me a tour and she introduced me to what BDSM was. And I thought, this is really cool. And she introduced me to my first session with a sub, and I was hooked. And so that's a little bit of my life. I'm also, after being a dancer for many years, I was also a comedian at the same time. And I was working in movies. And when I retired from the dance world, I switched completely to acting on stage and on screen. And then in New York, I created a dance theater company and a film production company. And I co-produced, produced, written, directed, and starred in many movies. And yeah, and I stopped all that in 2020 when I decided to do confinement in a nice place like south of France. And since I really pretty much only do BDSM fetish content for the platforms that are well known in our community.
Fantastic. That's quite a life, I would say. There's lots to take apart there. My first question: completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker?
Oh no, completely sober. In 2006, I met a guy that was sober, and I would, after the second date, he's like, "Oh, by the way, can you pick me up at this place in New York City? At this place, because I'm speaking at a meeting." And I was like, "What the heck is speaking at a meeting?" You know? And he's like, "Well, I'm sober." And I'm, "Oh, good for you." You know the oblivious thing of like the true alcoholic or addict, you don't know until you know.
Yes.
And for me, I knew I had problems with addiction because everything I did, from coffee to chewing gum to candy to smoking to drinking to everything, was in addiction, to drugs, of course. And so I would go to meetings with him, but I was just a spectator. And I heard his story and I thought, what the heck is that? Why am I with this guy? He's not for me. But then when I heard the shares in the room at my first meeting, I was like, well, this is a little bit of me. This is a little bit of me. This is like pretty much everybody who spoke, they were not speaking about their lives are as alcoholics. They were speaking about their lives and the problems they were encountering as a sober person. And I was like, I guess I am acting like them. And there was this meeting where we would go every day at 5:30. And there was this guy who every night was like, "Hey, my name is so and so, and I'm an alcoholic, and I have one day." And every day he had one day. And I was like, what is that about? So when we go out of the meeting, I asked my boyfriend, "Can you explain to me?" He's like, "Well, he's a chronic relapser. He relapses every single night, but he comes back because he wants to find a solution." And in my mind, it started, you know, alerting me about the fact that I wonder if I could not drink and not drug. And in my mind, I was thinking, when was the last time I was sober for a real period of time? And it was so long that I thought, I've got to try. So in silence for days and days, I counted days. And when I reached 90 days, I announced it to my boyfriend. And it was like, what? And I said, yeah, I've been doing this. And I'm realizing that I have a problem. He's like, but you're not an alcoholic. And I said, yes, I am. And so I started that day on 90 days. I called a person that I knew I wanted as a sponsor because we had a similar life
Hmm.
and I knew he could relate to my past and he could guide me and I could confide things to him that he would understand. And that same day, I went to a step meeting and I said for the first time, my name is Saba, I'm an alcoholic. And people knew me because I was going to meetings for 90 days.
Mm.
But they were like, wait, you're an alcoholic? I was like, yeah. And so they were like, well, welcome, whatever brings you in, it doesn't matter. As long as you find that it's your place, stay or don't stay. The reaction was quite incredible. And I worked the steps and I worked with my sponsor and then I got another sponsor and then I redid the steps and so and so. And I probably did the steps, I want to say 5 or 6 times, I forgot exactly. And I had, as soon as I could, people were like, oh, you should be, a sponsor. I was like, let me think on it. I don't think, even though I have 1 year of sobriety, I don't think I'm ready.
Hmm.
And I waited 3 years of sobriety before I actually took my first sponsee. And I realized I was ready for one. And only after maybe 10 years, I started to have multiple sponsees at the same time. And so, yeah, that's how I'm fully sober. And to me, I only say I'm an alcoholic because whatever uh, disease I have in terms of addiction, I think it's all called alcoholism. Whether it's, as I said, coffee, chewing gum, whatever, drugs and alcohol, my behavior is the same as an alcoholic, pretty much. I do respect people that call themselves addict, and that's their right.
Hmm.
To me, I say I'm an alcoholic.
That's fine. It's the thing is, it's what feels right for the person. I think for the longest time, I would say I was a crystal meth addict. I was never
Right.
addicted physically to any drug. It was more mentally. Now I lean more towards saying addict instead, or recovering addict. But
Yeah.
like as gay people, we like putting labels on things to make it a little bit more tangible and so on. And to be honest, if that works for you, that's the most important bit. And no matter what other people might think of the label. But yeah, like you said, some people just have addiction with everything, and it just can become an issue. My mom had a problem with chewing gum at one point. She destroyed her teeth because of it.
Oh
So
yeah.
she also has a little bit of an addictive personality. So the last question, what is clear play to you and why is it important?
Okay, so this is very interesting. I
Hmm.
started BDSM. I was still using and drinking,
Yeah.
and but for some reasons, I knew that while I was in session, I had to have a clear head because as a dominant master, I'm also quite a sadist. I can kill somebody. Let's put it that way, depending on what I do. So I knew that even though I was still drinking and all that, when I had sessions, I would be totally sober. And that's something that actually probably helped me once I became sober, because I realized, okay, I had times in my life where I could do things. And I thought, and I always played sober, so I can continue doing that. So that was one part of my sobriety that kind of like guided me through to continue to be sober. And today it's I play mostly with my personal subs. I have quite a few. I have a collection, as many people know. All of them are allowed to drink, drug, whatever they want, not when they are with me
Hmm.
and not when we are about to have a session. To me, the beauty of BDSM, there is that relationship, there is the discipline, there is the relationship between the master and the slave, the dom and the sub. And to me, what turns me on is to see a grown up man or woman that totally sober will say, yes, I am submitting to you. I am willing to do all these things you are about to do to me. So this has become something quite known in my circle. And however, I know that some subs that are not my subs that I will play with, when they come to my house and they're about to enter the dungeon, I can smell that they had a little drink. I can feel that they had maybe something to cut the edge. However, the session might last 6 hours. By the end of 6 hours, trust me, whatever they took is no longer there. And in any case, if I know that they tend to do that, I will have a conversation with them and say, look, I would rather not do this with you unless you are totally sober. When I step on you, when I'm whipping you, when I'm hurting you, I want you to realize that I'm hurting you. So you, in the case that it's too much, you can actually say, stop, it's too much. You probably saw on the medias that I am running for Mr. Leather France 2024, which is in 2 weeks from now. My two things that I want to carry with me as a Mr., if I become a Mr., is stop homophobic things around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say homophobic, it's really wide. It's also transphobic. It's I don't know how you say in English. Serophobia. Do you say that? People
No.
who are HIV positive.
Oh, I don't think we have that. Just a bit abusive towards people with HIV.
Right. So
Yeah.
we have a word in French which is sero, like it's the beginning of the name, serophobic.
Okay.
It's people who dislike and are afraid of people that might be HIV positive. I think there is so that's one of my thing. And the second thing is chemsex. Everybody is free to do what they want, but it has become something that it came to my attention that when you go to clubs or big events, we talked about that at Darklands, you go to some rooms, there are men and women who think that in order to have a BDSM session, they must be under some sort of chemical or illicit substances. And basically, to me, they're not there. I mean, I could be the one doing something to them. You could be the one doing something to them. They wouldn't even know who did what. And that's not something I take pleasure upon. But to me, I want the person to be conscious, and to realize that, okay, Saba or Princepunk in that case has done that to me. But if they say, oh my God, last night I was in that thing and I don't know what happened, what's the point? And so one of the things that I do is, because I attend a lot of events, I guess a lot of young people find me easy to talk to. I tend to talk to them when I know that they are using in order to have a BDSM session. I will tell them, have you ever tried without? Would you like to try, sober? We can do whatever you want. And then when you're done, you tell me. To me, it's important to make them realize that you don't need to be completely high and out in order to have BDSM sessions. In fact, I do think it's quite the opposite. It's like you have to be conscious of what's happening. And that's where the pleasure will come. A true masochist will enjoy the pain if he's conscious of the pain. That's how I see all this. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you answered more than enough the question, and it's absolutely true. Talking about masochism, it's like I had my first flogging session as a submissive in Berlin. I've always been the sadistic or the master or the top when it comes to that. And I didn't realize how many endorphins get released when you get that done.
Yes.
I literally had no control over my moans from it because I was just flooded. My system was flooded with good chemicals in my brain from it, because it was just like, oh, there's pain there. Let's go and sort that out and try to distract him. I don't know precisely what goes on in my brain when that happened, but it was just mind-blowing. And I'm not into pain. I'm a bit of a wuss, really, when it comes to pain. I just like inflicting it. So it was a little bit mind-boggling, a little bit like I had to digest it afterwards, but it's definitely something I want to do again.
Yeah, it's for having flogged quite a few newcomers in flogging. Many times I've had people even the strongest people starting crying and like losing it. And I talk to them, I say, would you like me to stop? Or are you all right? What's going on? And the first time it happens, I was quite shocked. I was like, oh my God, I guess I went too far. But no, it's actually very cathartic. When I've never been flogged, but when I was a child, I was a tortured child. And I remember what pain does. And it gives you that boost sometimes of energy, of rebellion, of clearness. And I know that I have some subs, when they first began to be my subs, they didn't have the experience they have now. And it was a challenge because we couldn't do long sessions. But some of them now, they will tell me, okay, master, we need to do a session, a flogging session, because I can tell I need it. And they come out of that, I don't know, they feel completely recharged, different. I don't know what does it. It's probably the endorphin and other things that we're not aware of. And interestingly enough, one of my subs he's a wuss. I mean, you cannot touch his nipples, you cannot do anything. But he's the one that takes the most, like, flogging and paddling and cropping and whipping. And he wants marks, he wants, and then he feels relaxed. Like when we finish, I can see he's like lying down and like, thank you. And he will say thank you for like an hour. And I find that quite interesting, and that's probably why I like it so much.
So you say you were emancipated when you were younger. Can you
Yes.
tell me a little bit why that was, if I may ask?
So when I was 5, my mother died, and my father, being a truck driver, thought, okay, I gotta get remarried so that way she can look after the kid, so I don't have to pay a babysitter. So he got married with the first woman he found 6 months after my mother's death. And so I was 6 when they got married. And once that woman realized she would not see her new husband and she was the babysitter, she started to take her, I don't know, her hatred and her pain on me. And she started to torture me, bit me up. I mean, like punched me, humiliate me. I mean, she did the worst things that you can imagine of, and I'm not going to get into details. And of course, I grew up, and sometimes I would go to school. I had bruises. I was limping. I couldn't sit. I mean, a lot of things like that. And people started to talk in town. And then she would do things in public. She would humiliate me in public. Like one little story, so you get the image. When I was 8, she stripped me naked in front of the car and made me go around the block in front of the car naked with a sign that say I pissed my bed and I'm a fucking wuss or something like that.
Jeez.
And so of course the neighbors saw that. So then more people talked. But this was the 80s. Back then, child abuse was not something we really managed well. Laws were not for the child, they were for the parents. As long as one of the parents was a biological parent, they could not take the kid out. Long story short, at 12 years, at 11, I started seeing a social worker at school and telling her the problems I had. And when I saw after 2 years she wasn't doing anything, I said, look, I'm going to stop telling you everything and I'm going to stay in school because I'm wasting my time talking to you. And she's like, it's really hard. I don't know what to do. And I said, send the cops, send someone. The cops came, rang the bell. Hello, ma'am, are you beating up your kid? Of course, she said no. So then I said to the social worker, go see this neighbor, this neighbor, this neighbor. The only 3 neighbors that didn't talk to my parents. They went, and those neighbors had pictures of my stepmother hitting me with scissors. I mean, doing things while I was in the garden, hosing me down naked. I mean, things, And of course, the judge saw that and was like, okay, we have to call these kids and parents and do something. And the judge told them, okay, I'm not allowed to take him out of the family, but I'm going to put him in a boarding school paid by the government. That way you won't have access to him. And in addition, I had an apartment on my own for the weekends because I couldn't stay in boarding school with my stepbrother. And the two of us had that apartment. And she had to bring us food every week. She had to do our laundry until we were both 18. So it's an emancipation that is not legal, but the judge did this to save me. And during the judgment, he said to them, look, if I hear right now, I cannot put you in jail because the law forbid it. But if I hear you touch Saba or his stepbrother once, you will go to jail. I'll find a way. And so, of course, she couldn't do that. Of course, she did other things horrible until I was 18. But I could survive that. You know, she could not hit me anymore. And so that's the emancipation. What was interesting, I hated that woman so much that when I turned 18, which is when you are legally of age in France to vote and work and do everything, you're an adult, I rang the bell to see my dad and I say, okay, Dad, now either you divorce her or I shoot her and I go to jail. And so he divorced her. I gave him a chance. We talked and we lived together for 2 years, kind of. And then after that, I realized he was a jerk. And so I left in another town. And for 21 years, I didn't see him. And I renewed with him one day. It's Facebook. He found me on Facebook, sent me a message and say, hey, you know, I would like to see you. And I thought, maybe it's a blessing. This is really what I said, which is weird. And so I said, okay. And we started talking on Facebook. And since 2013, no, we've met again in 2014. And now I live in the same town. I mean, I cannot say I love this guy, but he's okay, you know. I can see he's making an effort to be in my life. He knows all about my content. I'm always wearing, you know, leather, latex, skin, punk, you know, so he knows that he knew there was something. Plus, when I bought this house, one day he came in the house when I wasn't here and he went to the dungeon and he saw like whips and then dildos and then the sling and now I have a cage. I mean, I have a lot of things. And so one day I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell him what I'm doing. And I said, okay, I just want to tell you, I do, you know, porn content. And he looked really like, you know, weird. And then he's like, do you make money? And I said, well, yeah, a little. I was like, okay, that's good. And that was the end of the story.
Well, that's a view to take on it. It's like, well, are you making money of it? It's like, yeah. Oh, okay, fine, great. I had a similar conversation. I'm not going to say who it is, just out of privacy. I've been approached to make porn, and it's like, fine. How much are you being offered? It's like $5,000. I was like, do it. I'm not going to watch it. It's like they didn't end up doing it, but it was just one of those things. It's like, well, if you're getting paid, who cares?
Exactly. But I must say, I'm an exhibitionist as well. So for me, I started doing content even before we had platforms. I used to buy videotapes, and I could never find videotapes of full leather men. Or yeah, they would start in leather and then tear it off. And I was like, no, keep it on. You know, and so I started doing content for myself. And then in the States, I started to do BDSM fetish phone sex, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And then they started to have a video messenger with Yahoo at the time. And so people would send me money. And once I got the money, I would tell them, at this time, I will be doing a video live on Yahoo, blah, blah, blah. And so everybody who wanted to see, and it was basically me smoking, talking shit to some guy, and probably jerking off once in a while. And I started doing that, and I was making a lot of money. And then Pornhub and Xtube began, and I started uploading videos because I was searching for videos that I liked, and I couldn't find anything. So I started to make content. And I know I have inspired a few people. I actually trained a few subs to become masters in New York and they started to make content for XTube and all that. So it was, very cool. And I always liked doing this. I mean, it's really fun to me. Yeah, it became almost like a second nature. Having cameras doesn't bother me, and it's kind of exciting. And I love, I'm a little bit like the Marquis de Sade. Sade was the one that we came from, sadist and sadistic, and he wrote books that are quite cool. Not all, but quite cool. And he used to write, and he said in an interview that if he wasn't having an erection when he was writing, it wasn't good enough. And I have a bit of the same thing when I'm editing movies. If I'm not excited, I'm like, yeah, I don't put that on. If I feel like, wow, this is really cool. And it's not really being narcissistic. It's really, I look at the whole action.
Yeah.
The reaction of the subs and the interaction. To me, this is really cool. I mean, this is, it's fun to do. The day it becomes boring, I'll stop.
Well, yeah, it's you talking about making porn that excites you. I definitely recognize that, especially the stuff where, oh, he looks really fit in his gear and then he takes it all off. I was like, what's the point? Keep it
Yeah.
on. It's more hot if you keep it on. There's a reason it's a fetish porn. I think the only porn I've seen like where it's like full bluff men is the porn film that was made, I think, early 2000s or late 90s, Lever and Law, which is by the guy who created Bluff, the homepage, which
Okay.
is full bluff men, but it's literally the only porn I've seen that has proper bluff men where the gear stays on.
Yeah.
And those porn film excites me, but most porns where he's in full leather, he will strip down in a moment.
And there are things that I can stand. I'm a glove fetishist. I'm a leather fetishist. I'm a fetishist with a big F. So they never wear gloves. Sometimes they are barefoot. Forget it.
No.
You will never see me barefoot, and you'll never see me in my movies, at least, without gloves. Because to me, and my hand is tattooed and all that, and people are like, oh, we want to see a movie with your hand. I'm like, yeah, but whatever. And to me, those movies are missing things.
Yeah.
Plus, sometimes I can see those actors are not comfortable. They're not leather people. They wear what they were told, and that doesn't excite me. So in fact, I find amateur porn more interesting because most amateur people that will do porn will do what they like. And you will find and you will grow with them. And sometimes it grows in directions that you no longer like, and that's totally fine. But at least you have those videos that you like. And what I find interesting in amateur porn is that some people will say, "Oh, Saba or Master Princepunk," when they talk to me like that. They're like, "Would you do a video like the one you did on the motorcycle?" Blah 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 blah. Like, okay, I rather they ask me what they want to see, because for me, all the things I do, I love. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't do them.
No, absolutely not. So you mentioned a little bit earlier, you were a professional dancer.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So at 14, I had a motorcycle accident, and for 2 years I had really bad problems with my leg and all that. And when I was 16, I had to have another surgery. And when I was walking, I was like a little bit off. And I go to the doctor. I was like, "Look, what can we do? I'm 16 years old. I can fucking." Sorry, can we swear?
You can swear all you want, and you can be as filthy as you want.
Okay, sorry. So I'm like, I can fucking walk straight. I'm like, can you do something to help me? And the guy looks at me like, maybe you should do some dance. And he puts his arms like this. And I look at him and was like, well, do you think it would help? Because I'm going to do some freaking dance. He's like, I don't know. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the following month, I enter a new school. And what do I see? Dance classes. I'm like, I'm going. Never danced before. Didn't have rhythm. I opened the studio, only girls. And the teacher is like, if you're here to make fun of us, get out. I'm like, no, I want to take a class. So I take the class. And she sees I'm serious. She's like, okay, you may come back. And I go every week, only once a week. After 6 months, I had lost weight. I strengthened my leg. I was walking fast. I was running. I was like, I'm keeping doing this. And I performed at the end of the school year. And people were like, what the fuck, Saba? I mean, like, you're a dancer. I was like, am I? I mean, I don't know. And I enjoyed so much performing that I thought, I've got to do that again. So the following year, I went to a real dance school and I started taking more classes. And long story short, I continued all my studies and dance and theater at the same time. And once I finally graduated after 8 years of studies, I was 24 because of the jump of 5 years instead of being 29. At 24, I graduated 8 years of botany and research. And I'm like, well, I have nowhere else to go. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to probably dance because it's now or never. I could sing whenever I wanted. I could act until I wanted. But dance was when you're young.
Yes.
So I went to a professional school. I auditioned. They say, okay, you got to work, but we would like to train you. After 1 year, they took me in the company. And I started touring Europe. And while I was touring, I danced in one huge festival in France where the biggest companies of the world were there, including the Martha Graham Dance Company from New York. And I had never heard of it. I mean, I had heard of the name Martha Graham. I had never seen it. And I'm looking at this show and I'm like, wow, I want to do that. I don't know what that is because I was doing ballet and contemporary. And here I am seeing modern dance. I'm like, wait, this is different. This has like soul and meaning. I need to talk to them. And I didn't speak a word of English. I was 24. And I go backstage and I'm like, I love you. And so they laughed and they asked me and said, oh, we saw you dance. Two dancers spoke a little bit of French. And they tell me, we saw you dance. Would you like to take class with us? I said, sure. The next day, took class with them. The director of the company is like, oh, we would love to have you in New York. I'm like, sure. And I thought, I'm coming to New York. And I went for 2 weeks and I thought, at least I'll see the city, I'll see New York, and then I come back to France. And I have that under my belt, 2 weeks in the Martha Graham Dance Company. After 1 week of training with them, the director of the school and the company comes to me, he's like, we would like to keep you and train you. But it would take at least a year before you be trained in the Graham technique in order to become eligible to be in the dance company. I'm like, okay. And I thought in my mind, at the least I'll learn English. I always find like, I don't know why I shouldn't enjoy the fact that I was invited to dance. I wanted to another reason. So I stayed, and after 4 months, they had an audition for the company, and I went. And after the audition, they're like, oh, we'll call you guys and we'll let you know. And the next day, they didn't call me. So I went to see the director. I'm like, hey, did you call people? And she says to me, well, we didn't think you were quite ready. And I looked at her with my 5 words of English. And I said, look, I left France. I had an apartment. I was a performer. I was singing 5 times a week. I was in the theater. I was dancing at the opera. And now I am here and I'm doing nothing. So I want to learn the Graham technique. That's how I spoke, really.
Something out of hello, hello.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she was so shocked that someone would have the guts to tell her that. She took me as understudy. I learned every role, every chorus role, every soloist role, male, and then all the girl chorus, and then all the girl solos. And all the dancers around in the company knew that I knew all the roles. So often they would be like, Saba, what's the count here? What's this? What's that? And I would practice all the lifts and things and the hard things. 3 weeks before the New York season, which was basically almost a year that I was in New York, 3 guys got fired. Who was in the corner knowing everything? Me. So I entered as a soloist and I started performing with them, and I performed 5 years in the Graham group, and it was incredible. It was an experience that I would never trade for anything. Even though I was still drugging and drinking, I was controlled because of the dance. I had to be responsible. I
Yeah.
had to be able to dance and all that. So it was interesting because I managed to be sober when we were on tour. For example, like we would leave and perform all around the States. And during that time, I would really restrain myself. But the second I could drink, I would just like let it go. And it was quite challenging because those were raging drinking.
Mm.
They were needed. And and also I was pretty much, even though I was sober of not drinking and drugging, I was not sober in my mind. I was absolutely impossible. My partner in the company hated me and I hated her back. Yet on stage we were gorgeous, you know, but as soon as we were off stage, I mean, we couldn't stand each other.
I guess that's
You know,
the industry where you don't have to like a person to perform together. So,
that's right. That's right. But so this is how my dance career happened. And then after 5 years, they got bankrupt, the Graham company, and they were like, okay, dancers, you can stop rehearsing. You are no longer part of the company, no longer part of the school. I was teaching, I was making a living, you know, only with dance. I had my visa through the company. I lost my visa. I went to another school and I said, look, this is what happened with the Graham company. I found myself in the States and I have 30 days to legalize my stay.
mm.
Can you offer me a visa? And I got hired as a teacher in another school. And a year later, I started Saba Dance Theater and I started creating my own shows, which I have done for 5 years. I've done 5 seasons in New York, quite successful, honestly. Apart from the fact that it costs a lot of money to do shows in America, you've got no funding. I was tired of putting my own money. So I decided to stop the dance world and go back to my job as an actor and go into movie work. And I had the chance to find a mentor, and I became his assistant. And I was teaching screenwriting, directing, and acting at School of Visual Arts in New York for 8 years. And that was an incredible experience because I got to do a lot of movies, both in Hollywood and as in the independent circle of movies. I've won quite a lot of awards, which allowed me to go to film festivals around the world and meet incredible people that became my friends. And what was interesting is like that's when I became sober. I finished my dance career in 2005 and I became sober in 2006, which was the beginning of my acting career,
Mm.
my true acting career. And so I started performing exclusively sober, which was a new thing.
Mm.
And people who knew me from the years before were like, what happened? I was like, I got sober. And when I did the steps where you have to make amendment, amends to people, I cannot tell you the amount of people I had to make amends to. I mean, New York City is a big freaking city. And when you're a dancer and an actor, you have quite a large group of people that you work with all the time.
Yeah.
And I heard these people. I mean, I was just awful. It is mind-blowing to me to think of who I was and who I am today. Back then, I was self-seeking. I was extremely selfish, and which is comprehensible in a way because of the childhood I had. I was seeking that love and admiration and all that. Today, most people will say I'm arrogant and I do the same thing, but it's actually quite different. My confidence is often mistaken for arrogance. When you see a guy like this walk in the street doing his, grocery shopping, yeah, I agree. It looks like he's an arrogant bastard. But no, it's just a guy who just assumed who he is, and that's me. I mean, I know a lot of people that have a septum, and most of us who have a septum, the first few times we have it, we flip it up, we hide it, we take it off. I don't know why, but we do that. It took me maybe like a year for me to accept that I have a septum. Today, I totally forget that I have it, unless it gets caught in something.
Oh, then you remember.
Yeah, then I remember because that's painful, especially that size. But the thing that is interesting is like people, same with the tattoos. I have a lot of tattoos, and people will come to me and like, "Oh, does it hurt?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" You know? And they talk about tattoos, piercings, whatever. But so yeah, I feel like what was interesting is that sobriety helped me accept who I was, and today I am truly both Saba and Princepunk. Saba is also a stage name that I have from the dance world, but I have become Saba. I have that entity for many many years. No one calls me by my Christian name, which and in fact, if someone calls it, I will not react because I never hear that name and I don't take it for me. Princepunk became to life when I started uploading videos to Xtube, Pornhub years and years ago. When I did my first recon profile, I had to find something cool, and since I have a Prince Albert and I'm a punk, I thought Prince Punk.
That's very good. That's very good.
But now I joke and I say Prince Punk comes from the fact that one, I'm a punk, and two, I'm a prince. And you know, people don't know if it's true or not. It's so funny.
I was about to say the Prince of Darkness, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
Well, if for anyone listening, you won't be able to see this, but Saba is sitting in a very, I would say, a glorious chair whilst doing this interview, and it's quite something. And I'm very jealous. I would love a chair like that. It's a statement piece, especially if you're a dom, I think.
It's a throne that I had made in Indonesia, and I wanted something dark, and it has elephant heads. I'll show just the elephant head
Oh
right
wow.
here. No, and it has that shine that reminds me of leather. Uh, it is 1 meter and 80 centimeters high, and unfortunately, it doesn't fit my staircase to the dungeon.
Oh no.
So when I bought it, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put it in my living room. But I also have, I don't know if you see this. I have this type of throne,
Yeah.
uh, and I have one here, and I have one also in the dungeon, the same, but I painted black. Now, I recently purchased a second house, not too far from here, and I'm renovating the whole house, and I'm making into like a BDSM house. The dungeon is like 36 square meters, and the dungeon will finally have this throne inside it. So I quite look forward to move in. It's probably going to be in the fall because of the construction I'm doing there. It's quite incredible. One of my subs is a blacksmith. So together we are planning on like building crazy things inside. I have a slave pit in the middle of the dungeon.
Okay.
So slave can go inside and then be like that high pretty much.
Wow.
So just the shoulders and head will come off and perfect for bootlicking and other things. And I can probably put, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 slaves in it, and they would be comfortable still. Yeah, we will have few cages and other things, little surprises.
Well, it's nice to hear that the chair can fit. I think it
Right.
comes under what fetish people problems.
Yeah.
Furniture is too big. But
Mhm.
it's amazing what you've accomplished. You mentioned that you also made films.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what kind of films did you make? Well, I know
I mean,
you do the online stuff and the kink stuff, but what did
yeah,
you do of films before that?
yeah. I have made 2 feature films. I have made a web series, originally a web series that became an Amazon Prime series in the States. That series is actually quite an interesting thing because that's what started my film production company, Cloudy Sky Films. It's called Sherry's Kitchen. And in that series, I play a woman, very much like Shakespearean times. There are no connotation of like, oh, is he gay? Is that a trans? No, It's a guy playing a woman. Her character is a full female. She's pregnant. She has children. And it is sort of a comedy. I mean, there are very funny moments. But because I'm French, it seems like I cannot do things without drama. So everything that I have produced is very dramatic. In fact, the scripts that have won the most awards, the films that have won the most awards, are always my darkest scripts. And I don't know on purpose, because I also do very funny, crazy, hilarious, what the fuck movies. I started a collection of 1 minute movies to show my students that you could make a 1 minute movie and send it to film festivals, and it could be not only accepted, selected, but also won awards. So I have probably 3 or 4 1 minute movies that have won together probably 80 awards.
That's
And it's
amazing.
yeah, and it's hilarious because they are very stupid movies, but they have an arc. There is a beginning, middle, and end. The acting is spotless. The stats are incredible. The music was composed for it. I mean, like everything is done like a long movie, except it's 1 minute. And what's interesting is that the last 1 minute movie I've made a while ago got me to direct a off-Broadway show. The guy saw this like, I have to work with you, and I'm like, okay, what do you need me for? He's like, well, I'm looking for a producer and a director for this off-Broadway show I'm doing. I'm like, well, let me read the script. And long story short, I did that. So it's interesting because I can have like the funniest thing and the most dramatic and heavy crying thing, depressing thing. I love horror, and one of my shorts that won quite a few awards is called Stam the Vamp, and it's about a vampire who has a group of friends that are werewolves, witches, vampires, and zombies who are trying to stop killing people. And so they created VA, Vampires Anonymous.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it's totally stupid, but the way it's done, it's stupid and fun, It's the kind of thing you watch and you're like, oh, that's stupid.
Well, do you know what? I think sometimes the most off the wall stuff is the one that, and you kind of mentioned that the most successful stuff is the stuff where it's very dark and very dramatic. But then again, human nature, we gravitate towards darkness and stuff like that. I think it's natural to do, and I think at least as fetishists, we accept that we have dark sides to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important, and it's also quite healthy.
Yeah, for sure. The script that won the most awards and that almost got produced is about a couple, a 41-year-old man and a 17-year-old boy falling in love on a cruise ship. And it's about age difference and consent. And that script is quite interesting because I wrote it on a cruise ship based on an adventure I had with a young boy. He was actually 17 and a half and about to be 18, which is a legal age in many states. But I didn't want to go further. But of course, I thought, what a great story. What are the chances that a 17-year-old will fall in love with a 41-year-old at the time? I am 52 now.
Mm.
So it was quite interesting. And so I wrote the scripts. In my scripts, of course, they fall in love and they find each other and blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's got to be a little happy ending. But it's very dramatic because so this script was sent to many huge film festivals, like that you've heard of, that everybody has heard of. Even if you're not in the movie industry, you've heard of it. And I got feedbacks that were horrible in the sense of this. There were great feedback, but one huge festival tells me, well, because I have rheumatoid arthritis, which is a condition where you have inflammation of the joints and you have pain. So I put that in the script. And they're like, well, since it's a gay couple, maybe he should be HIV positive. And I'm like, why? I have that type of things sent.
Mm.
And I still kept all this because I'm like, maybe one day I can bring this out and say, do you realize what you've done? Like, why? Because, and the story was written with two guys, but it could be two women, or it could be even a guy and a girl, or a girl and a guy, you know, whatever. It's really the sex, the gender of the characters in that script are irrelevant.
Mm.
It's the event that is relevant.
Yeah.
And I purposely wrote it with two men because I thought, well, this is my story, so it's based on mine. But I could change it easily. And when I received that, I thought, we are not there yet. I mean, you know, this is a little bit of homophobia, you know, like, oh yeah, they're gay, he should have HIV. I'm like, why not syphilis, you know, or you know, whatever, or diabetes, whatever. I mean, like, it was weird, you know, and I received comments like that, and I thought, you guys, you don't understand what you're doing right now. And I'm talking about like major festivals, you know, like Cannes Film Festival, same height, you know, but American. And I cannot say who it is, but you know.
No, of course not. It's interesting. I've as a recovering addict, I've been in situations where doctors have assumed I have HIV because I'm a recovering addict, and this is even coming when I was sitting in a gay clinic. They were assuming that. It was not even a straight person assuming it. It's just a lack of knowledge and lack of education. Just to like round the episode off, as we're running a little bit long, but there's so much knowledge, so I'm happy to talk a little bit more. Absolutely. You mentioned that you did comedy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, can we just round the episode off and talk a little bit about that?
I think when you are the most depressed person in the world, and when you are, you know, self-seeking, I find that making people laugh is the easiest way to get something.
Mm.
At the moment, for example, I am on Snapchat. I think I'm Saba Princepunk or something like that. And every morning I do impersonations of people that don't exist. I take filters and I give them voices and I tell a joke. It's all in French, sadly, because I have mostly a French audience at the moment, though I'm starting to have some English-speaking people. My audience goes literally from like, you know, the 20s to old people. Like there are old ladies in town here that know I do this. They actually had Snapchat installed on their smartphones. That's probably the only app they have. Just to hear Jacqueline. So Jacqueline is this red hair filter that I put on in the morning, and she speaks like this. And so, for example, this morning the story was like, you know, they say that man comes from monkeys, but I want to say they tend to go back to it, no? And that's it. And then I have other characters, you know, I have a prostitute, I have a man who's super high all the time, I have a doctor, and they all comment on whatever I say. And that's what makes the whole thing funny. Comedy is something, sometimes you don't even need to speak the same language with a person. If you find a way to make them laugh, you know, that's all you need. Smiling is the best tool. I know on my pictures, I'm quite intimidating because obviously my pictures come from photo shoots when I'm in full leather, latex, or whatever, and I'm usually not smiling. That doesn't mean, you know, smiling doesn't take anything off my experience in BDSM and who I am. I can be, you know, tying you up and telling you jokes at the same time. You know, the whole experience is something. I feel too many people feel the need to prove themselves in this community where there is nothing to prove to anybody. Just be yourself, take your time. There is no, it's not a race. You know, no one has to be better than the other at any time, at any point. Just do what you like, do it how you think it's done. And if you don't know, talk to people you know have done it. And try to be nice with people. Just because we are masters and dumbs doesn't mean that we have to be fucking assholes all the time. Like, hey, dude, you know, that drives me crazy, honestly. Also, I want to just finish by saying consent also comes to the fact that just because I have a sub with me doesn't mean that because you're dumb, you're allowed to talk him down. He's a human being first. and only if he consents to be talked down will you be able to. That's how I live my life.
Consent is so important. I think it's one of the things that's been quite a topic for the last couple of years, which is like, well, that's a non-brainer, really. Consent is so important, even in sex or fetish spaces. What was it? I went to a sauna this weekend, last past weekend, for the first time in 8 years because it was a bit of a trigger point for me. And I had several times where I had to remove someone's hand from my crotch where it wasn't
Absolutely.
invited. And it's like, I am in a sauna, I am naked, but that's not an invite. If we
No.
got eye contact and you can see that I want to, you don't even have to do hand gestures, you can
Yeah.
body language, then fine. But they haven't even talked to me. They just go up and grab.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, that's not how I work. Not anymore. Definitely not. And and that's the same in a fetish space. If you're wearing chaps, don't grab their
Oh,
ass.
forget it. I was thinking about it. I love wearing chaps. I love the feeling, the freedom of them. I never wear chaps in public, in events, ever. Because the only time I've done that, I mean, so many people grabbed my ass, spanked me. I was like, why? Who told you you could do that? You don't even know me. Like you don't do that just because I my ass is out. I mean, this is really frustrating. Consent has become quite an issue. I feel it's all, I don't want to get into a long conversation again, but with Facebook, Instagram, where we are constantly asked to like, dislike, la da da da, people have no more filters of sanity and reason. And when you walk in the street, you will have young people telling you, holy shit, your piercings is fucking big. I'm like, who the fuck are you to talk to me? Like, is that what you say to somebody you don't know?
Yeah.
No, you don't. And it all comes from social media. We are asked constantly, and I mean, you get asked to put comment on everything. I'm sure after this Zoom conversation, Zoom will send me a message. How was your Zoom conversation? How would you rate it? And we do that all day long. We are asked our opinions for everything. And so that's why the consent has become so challenging, because people feel like they are allowed to do it. And it's a challenge. I mean, at Folsom, I see things, or Darklands. I'm like, what's going on here?
It's like one of the things I'm really pleased about is we met at Darklands and it was a slightly different setting because, as you said, people with a certain look, you can be a little bit intimidated. And I know with myself, I can struggle in social situation. And now I've met you as we were a group of sober people that met up, and that was great. And all of a sudden, a little bit of that persona or whatever you radiate, depending on the gear, was taken a little bit away, and it was much easier to approach you as a person, as a human. And after that, I saw you in your kit with metal work around your neck and so on. And if I had not known you, I would probably not dare to approach you. You were standing with one of your friends who had eye tattoos and the whole
Yeah,
face was covered. I wouldn't have dared to talk to him, not because I have any judgment about how he looks. It's just more, I would be intimidated too, because what would we have to talk about? In a
yeah,
way. That makes sense without. And you know what? He was absolutely a delight, really
yeah,
interested in what I did. And I was just like, you know who I am? And because I'm slightly at a different area of fetish and so on, but I was just impressed with the gear, especially your metal collar. That must be heavy as hell. And but it's also a random person coming up and kissing you deterrent because they would be spiked.
yeah,
And that,
yeah.
I'm assuming that metal collar was made by the sub who's doing your metal work in your new dungeon.
Yes, yeah. Because my slave makes collars for all my slaves, and he sell collars to people around. And I don't know, we had sold I don't know how many collars, and I was like, wait a minute, everybody has a collar. I have shit. And they have handcuffs, they have ankle cuffs, they have chains, and I have nothing. I mean, I have a cage, it's not even for me, it's for them. I
Mm.
was like, I want a freaking collar, like a master's collar. And I drew something with him, and I said, okay, I love Maleficent. I always loved that
Mm.
persona. I said I want like Maleficent, like with two spikes in the back, two in the front, so when people come too close, they get, like the spikes. Boom. We drew it, he put it together, and he did it. He did it. And I wore it at Folsom the first time. It's not that heavy. It's maybe 3 kilos. At the end of the day, I had like all of this was so irritated. The next day, I had to put like gauze and everything. But this is part of the thing. I love that color, and I wore it at Darklands, and then I wear it sometimes in sessions. But I'm not going to wear it at every event. I mean, now people have seen it. I'm a little bit of a diva in that thing where I'm like, oh yeah, they've seen it. But maybe I'll come up with something else.
Well, that's the thing. And I was about to say, after this conversation, you need to give me a link to your metal worker because it is.
Absolutely.
I don't have any metal work, but it's always excited me. Maybe not the
Well,
spiky bits, but I always kind of like metal cups or metal like collars and so on. I always find that quite exciting. I've just never really approached it.
on Instagram, it's Iron Punk Factory.
People can see.
And the cool thing is that we make unique things. Like we'll never make two colors the same. We'll never make two cages the same. He makes incredible things. For next week, we're going to a big event in south of France, and he's made new things like a square collar with square handcuffs and square ankle cuffs with like a chain. I mean, I don't even know what he did. It's incredible. He made a crown for the Mr. Rubber Friends and a scepter, out of bolts, metal bolts. It's just incredible. I think I have it here, actually. If you have one sec. I mean, this is a avant-première.
That is incredible. For anyone listening, it's literally wrench bolts all set together in like a massive crown. That is
I
something.
mean, it's not for me, so it doesn't fit me well, but I don't know how to wear it. But it's absolutely gorgeous. And he made the scepter.
That is absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful work.
And it's interesting because he makes pretty much anything people ask. Someone asked for a metal collar with a shutter here, for dogs, the electric shutters
Yeah.
that could be inserted. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll make that. And he made this thing, and it's incredible because you have this massive metal collar, and then inside you have like this electric thing that shots you if you bark. I mean, you know what I mean.
Of course, I've seen the real dog collars around Folsom and so on. I think my ex had one. Never put it on me. I did not want it on me. So now to round the episode off, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on. If anyone's listened or watched and you've said something that's interested them, where they want to maybe ask you some questions, where can they get a hold of you?
So the best way is princepunk.com. You will find my Instagram, my Twitter, Facebook. I don't really go, but Facebook, and then all my like kinky things, that some people might want to see. But really, to find my Instagram, I would say it's the easiest way to find it. Twitter, I'm shadow banned, so the only way to find me is through princepunk.com. And on that Twitter, you will see some things that you might enjoy. But yeah, I would
I'll
say
have to look it up
Instagram.
afterwards. I may have to look it up afterwards just to see.
Instagram is probably the easiest way to communicate and talk. And then after that, we can definitely exchange, numbers and talk through WhatsApp or whatever.
Fantastic, fantastic. And just to end the conversation, any piece of advice you would give to an aspiring sub or someone who's just become sober?
Well, that's two different things, but I would say whatever it is, whenever you do something new, turn towards people who have done it before, whatever it is. And that's really how you do things. Don't do things on your own, because you cannot practice BDSM on your own, especially not BDSM. Do not practice BDSM on your own. And you cannot become sober alone. Anything you do it with someone who has done it before. And don't be afraid to communicate. Ask questions, talk, and listen. That's the way we can go forward in anything, I feel.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on, Saba.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want to say, I'm so glad we've done this because we've spoken many years ago. You probably don't remember when you were newly sober, I want to say. And I told you, well, good for you. Just keep going one day at a time.
Yeah.
And look at you. You you're blossom, you're blossoming. You are quite a gift to this community. I am thrilled to have been your guest, and I am thrilled to know you, and I really look forward to know you more.
Same to you, same to you. I've definitely learned a lot more about you today in this conversation, and it's been a joy to have you on. Thank you very much, Saba.
And thank you for your audience for listening and watching, and don't hesitate.
Fantastic. And that was Saba. It was actually been absolute joy to talk to him and all the well of knowledge. We could probably keep talking for an hour more if we dived into all the things he's done. Thank you for listening. Keep safe, keep sexy, keep kinky, and get into that dungeon because he has a very good one. But yeah, thank you very much for listening and have a good week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.